So I remember the first ever entrepreneurial venture. I must have been about 12 years old. My mother would like pack me these sandwiches, and in Hong Kong, our canteen was like fish balls and dumplings and all sorts of different things, right? So it was novel to them. And so a lot of the kids that were in my class, they would kind of see these sandwiches. They're like, oh, can I get a sandwich? It's like, yeah, you can have a sandwich for $5. And that's, you can have the whole one for $20, right? €2. And yeah, I started selling my sandwiches to this kid. So I'd be getting sandwiches in my lunchbox. I'm selling it to him, and then I'm getting that, and I'm going to the canteen, and I'm buying whatever I want to eat. And I realized that was probably my first ever kind of business deal.
Hi, Mark. Welcome to the LifeOfAFounder. How's it going?
Going well, Max. Thanks so much for having me. Looking forward to sharing a bit more about my story.
My pleasure. Today's about your story more than your startup, although we know that founders, it's about their own venture. But let's talk about yourself. Where do you come from? Who you are?
Yeah, despite the name and the accent, I was actually born in Hong Kong, which is where I live now. I grew up here. My dad was from the UK. My mum is a Eurasian from Sri Lanka originally. So I grew up in the city, spent a lot of time going back to the UK and did university there. Always wanted to come back to Asia. So I spent time living in Shanghai, learned a bit of Mandarin, and even spent a bit of time living in Malaysia. And then, yeah, came back to Hong Kong 19 years ago. And originally actually started off in headhunting. I kind of fell into headhunting like many people did. And at that time, it was an industry where you could do a lot very quickly. I worked for a British firm for 5.5 years. And from there, about 14 years ago, I set up my own company, a first kind of bootstrap business called Silverstrand that was placing traders and portfolio managers into hedge funds. And it was the first experience running a business, and it was obviously fun. Made all the mistakes of a first-time founder, and learnt those lessons. And yeah, after sort of 4 or 5 years, we did quite well. And I was in a position where I could actually had a bit more time, and I set up another business soon afterwards, which was doing also recruitment, but more for the ESG, sustainability, and built environment. And took that business to profitability. Sold it a couple of years ago. And yeah, I think you know this as well. When you're an entrepreneur, you kind of get this bug. You see problems and you want to sort of solve them yourself if you can. And I actually, when I had these 2 recruitment companies, I saw that there was a gap in the market for, I guess, like financing to asset-light companies in Asia. So basically like a lending platform, but for recruitment companies and IT consultancies, digital marketing firms that couldn't typically get good bank financing in Asia. So created this fintech business called Zettle, which is a fintech lending company active in Singapore, Hong Kong, Malaysia. Has also done loans in the Philippines and Australia. And yeah, took that business through a whole journey. We sort of saw that huge 400% year-on-year growth that VCs love. And then when interest rates went up in 2023, we started to see delinquencies and defaults also rising. And, kind of got a bit existential for a while. And we kind of made the conscious decision that, we really had to kind of survive. And how are we going to do that in a market where it was really hard to raise equity? And we made the conscious decision to get to cash flow break even. So, at one point we had about 14 headcount. We basically kind of cut our way to profitability and then automated a lot of other aspects, including using AI. And yeah, we got that business to cash flow break even in 2024, profitability last year. I think beginning of this year, we just hit $1 billion US in loans since we started, which is a pretty cool milestone. And yeah, I kind of became more of a non-executive director of that business last year. And then again, kind of came back to full circle. So last year I created an HR tech platform called Preferred. And yeah, it's taking all the learnings from fintech, all the learnings from recruitment over, 19 years, bring it all together, and then kind of targeting an industry that is also going through change, right? With AI, we're seeing huge change every day. And yeah, we're looking to try and solve some of the new problems that we see in hiring. So I kind of gave you a snapshot of about 40 odd years just then, Max.
I mean, that's very interesting. You've done already so much. You're young. You're pretty young. But you've done a lot already. You have a lot of experience. What's the difference between the first and the last?
I think the first business I set up, like I mentioned, it was bootstrapped. I was an entrepreneur. It was all myself and my co-founders' capital. We definitely made mistakes. We overhired, we overspent on SaaS tools. We maybe didn't have the right kind of accounting software in place to really keep up to date on our cash flow position. We made a lot of mistakes in the early days. This is 14 years ago, right? It was sort of two guys in a tiny shoebox of an office, just trying to make money and make it big. And then over time, we started to hire, and we made some wrong hires, or maybe just weren't the right personality fits. Then we expanded. We expanded the office. We expanded the team. We took on a lot more costs, and again, we made the mistake of probably overspending on various tools as well. And that was obviously a lot of lessons learned. And I'd say that versus preferred, preferred has now come after I've been an entrepreneur for 14 years. I've been involved in raising external capital now for 8 years because of my previous startup Zettel. So I'm coming into this business in a different perspective. I guess I feel battle hardened and more prepared than I did before. I'm more aware of what potential pitfalls there are to keep an eye on, which is again hiring, cash flow, macro issues, and try and be a little bit more on top of them earlier. I think people always make mistakes. You're never going to not make a mistake, but you can get better at identifying those mistakes and quickly pivoting, right? And this is something that Stephen Bartlett also talks about, in his podcast, right? Is that it's good to make decisions quickly, but also you have to be humble enough to adjust those decisions if you realize you've made a mistake. Whether that's a pivot, whether that's taking someone else's advice, I think that's very important. And I guess that's probably what I would say is different now. And maybe the last thing is, we've raised some external capital. We're currently raising at the moment. Whenever you have external investors on your cap table, there's an expectation. They are stakeholders in your business. They believe in you. They believe in your company. And you have an obligation and a right to ensure that they're protected. And ideally, obviously, they also see a multiple on their investment. But I think more important that you act with integrity and the right kind of ethics. There's all these stories you see of founders raising millions of dollars and then squandering on private jets, champagne, and caviar. And I think that it's a lot harder to do that in Asia. I think if you're in Silicon Valley, perhaps there's a little bit more loose money going around. It's a lot harder to do it in this part of the world. But I'd say that that's the difference, right? You got a responsibility to all these investors and stakeholders. So yeah, I think that's probably what it is. I started my first business when I was 28. I think it was the right time, but it was still quite young to do that. Obviously now there's 22-year-old billionaires, but at 28, it felt pretty early, 14 years ago. Whereas now, 41, I just feel very prepared and ready for this. And so I'd say that's some of the main differences between then and now.
I mean, that's the point. When you start, the first time is always the first time for everything in life, right? You don't have experience.
Correct.
You move ahead, you start getting the right experience and moving forward. You understand all the mistakes that you've done before. Probably you're not going to repeat again.
Yeah.
But as you said, it's very important also what you said about pivoting. Yes, I mean, you start, you try, you test, and after maybe it doesn't work. But many founders are reluctant to stop. They keep going because they see actually how to pivot, like failure, okay? I was not right. But again, pivoting is extraordinarily important, I agree. Indeed, founders must recognize when it's not right towards the end. Your forecast is not exactly what was supposed to be, and maybe it's time to move on, right? Changing what must be changed. But you worked for a company before becoming an entrepreneur. So
yes.
In terms of feeling, right? What's the difference? Moving from an uncharted territory, completely unknown, like being an entrepreneur, to a pretty comfortable place to be an employee when you get even with a good wage salary. How do you feel when you made this move?
That's a very good question. I'd say, look, I have to be brutally honest. in a sense, the decision was made easier for me because if you imagine back to those times, right? So we had the global financial crisis in 2008, 2009. So I'd started working for this company in January 2007. So I saw, 2 good years, and then I saw the biggest depression, we'd seen since the Great Depression. And what really happened at that time is, at that time, the headcount in the office was around 12, and they cut it from 12 to 4 very quickly. They just cut 2/3 of the office. And what they said to the remainder of us is, you have to eat what you kill. I'm sorry, guys, we can't look after you anymore. We can't guarantee these relationships. We're going to pay you as long as we can pay you. But after that, you've got to basically win your own accounts in Asia, whether these are banks or hedge funds, wherever it is. You're kind of on your own there in Hong Kong. This was a London headquartered company, and their priority was to look after the HQ. So myself and one of the other senior consultants, we went out and we actively BD'd for business. Myself, I went down the hedge fund, systematic trading firm and family office route. The other person that became my co-founder in the first business, he was trilingual, Cantonese and Mandarin speaker. So he went down the Chinese securities firms and asset managers route. And obviously at that time, China was also emerging, and also the buy side, the hedge fund world was also emerging. So I think part of it was maybe luck, part of it was timing, and part of it was also, hard work and tenacity. And we basically moved into these sectors. We were able to bring in new clients and business and revenue. And actually, what we saw then is that the company started to hire again because things were looking good. And I think the headcount went up to about 10 or so by around 2012. And, we kind of were talking ourselves. We're like, well, they're basically benefiting from all the work that we have done ourselves, him and me. Why are we doing this for them with no equity stake in the business? And, it was one of those situations where every year, at the end of the year, they would dangle that carrot. Oh, there's some equity coming here. We're going to bring in an equity share option plan. Don't worry, there's equity coming. And obviously, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year goes by and it never arrives. So I think for us, there was also partly that we were kind of given a little push. I don't harbor any ill will, to be clear, but there was a little push there. And so it made the decision to set up a bit easier. And I'd also say Hong Kong is actually a pretty easy place to set up a company. You can very quickly incorporate. It's very affordable. There's lots of corporate secretary firms and accountants around. And of course, there's a lot of major enterprises here. So you can be a small limited company with 2 directors and shareholders, and you can go and pitch for business, big US banks, particularly back then, multi-billion-dollar hedge funds. And we did, and we won that business based on primarily relationships. So I think that did help us. And yeah, look, the setup costs are not huge. At that time, we just had a service office. As I said, it doesn't cost much to incorporate the company. You do a website and some branding, and you're really good to go. So I think that for us, it didn't feel like as huge a risk. Obviously, for our partners who heard that we're going to be going from a fixed salary with commission on top and annual leave and all these other benefits to, oh, so you're getting 0 this month, 0 next month, and maybe 0 the month after that until you generate revenue. I think there was some difficult conversations to be had with wives and girlfriends at the time. But in the end, they were fairly supportive of what we were doing. And yeah, look, it worked. I mean, everything that's come in my career, every other business, it always comes back to that first company, Silverstrand. And, I'll always be very thankful for that. And yeah, as I said, it's still going. 14 years later, with a team of consultants, working with all sorts of firms. Obviously, myself, given all the other things that I do, my roles become, more sort of managerial and operational, kind of stepping off a bit. But we've got a great team of people and some long relationships that we've had for 14 years with these clients. Actually, some of them even go back to, the better part of 18, 19 years.
Oh, that's brilliant. I mean, that's true. And somehow, you must, in the way how you are going to elaborate, moving from this be paid by the end of the month, let's put it this way, and
Yes,
maybe don't
exactly.
get paid at all. Don't get paid at all. Maybe a wife or a girlfriend or even your own life. You still
Correct.
must pay the bills.
You're
It's
used to a
very.
lifestyle as well, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, I always say to many founders, look, you must be ready to reduce your lifestyle a lot. Because moving from a well-paid £10,000, euro, dollar, whatever it is per month, which means wherever you live, even in New York or London, you can still make a decent life, to maybe nothing or 2,000, you must cut everything.
Yeah. And the impact it has on families, right? I know couples that have broken up because they were accustomed to a lifestyle, right? You go to Michelin-starred restaurants, you order the nicest bottle of wine, you expense it all, and it's a big struggle for startups.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I've been employed for 12 months, and after I decided to stop because, I mean, I just was feeling no good. Yes, I mean, get a good salary, but for me, that's not for me. I don't live my life. So back then I was not engaged. I mean, I was actually single. And when I went home, I told my mom, "Oh, you know what? To my family, I'm quitting." I said, "Why are you quitting? They pay you so much." And they were paying seriously a lot. I said, "But I don't feel good. I mean, I can't see any future here." And the first thing I thought to myself, I said, "Okay, how much do I have in the bank? All right, so let's give 24 months of runway, which means I'm going to cut no half. I'm going to cut 80% of anything. And I need this money cover me for the next at least 24 months because I had no idea what's going to happen to me now." So after I started my company, it went very well. But again, you don't know. I mean, you can go anywhere and no money even to cry on.
Correct. And that's the thing, right? You don't know how it's going to go. And the truth is, right, I mean, you can look at the numbers, right? Close to 90% of startups fail, within 3 years. Only 4% of startups ever generate $1 million in ARR. It's hard. It's really hard to make a successful startup, right? It's not every company you see is a Merkle or Facebook or ChatGPT, any of these kind of businesses. Right? It doesn't happen that easily.
Indeed it is. But as you said before, I see problems everywhere. But just problems to be an entrepreneur is not enough. You must have a strong ego inside, a strong will to make this happening, a strong will to make a problem becoming a business. So what inspired you outside problems?
So look, it's interesting, right? Because you kind of, once you get into becoming an entrepreneur, then you sort of wonder, was I always meant to be an entrepreneur? Did I just fall into this by chance, right? It's kind of that you go through that. Some people, they're going to be entrepreneurs as teenagers, right? There's some people that are like, I'm going to go to Stanford, I'm going to do computer science, I'm going to drop out after year 2, and I'm going to build $1 billion company. And there are some people that do that, and that's phenomenal, But the vast majority, 99.9% of people that set up their own companies, they probably don't think about that. They reach a point in their lives, like you said yourself, right? You got to a point when you were like, I just don't want to do this anymore. And for myself, it just felt, why am I doing this for them? I should be doing this for myself. You kind of reach a point where that comes through. But yeah, then you kind of always try. And then once you actually done it, you're like, oh, how did that come about? Was that always my personality type? Why did my career guidance counselor tell me that I should have been an entrepreneur? Why were they trying to push me to be a lawyer or do something else? And I was sort of thinking back, and I was like, actually, I remember when I was in school, even then, you kind of think, oh, maybe I was quite savvy, actually. So I remember the first ever entrepreneurial venture. I said this on, I think I said this on another podcast. I realized now the first ever entrepreneurial venture I had, I must have been about 12 years old, 11 or 12 years old. It was like beginning of secondary school. And my mother would like pack me these sandwiches. And in Hong Kong, most Chinese kids, local kids, would get a different kind of lunchbox, right? They didn't get a sandwich like we would get, which would be like a tuna sandwich or something like that. They would get normally noodles or rice or other things. And so a lot of the kids that were in my class, they would kind of see these sandwiches. They're like, oh, can I get a sandwich? It's like, yeah, you can have a sandwich for $5. It's like, what's that? 50 euro cents, right? And then I was like, okay, you can have it. It didn't cost anywhere near that. And also you can have the whole one for $20, right? €2. And there was this couple of kids that actually do this. I just want to get these Western sandwiches. I'm like, okay. Our canteen was like fish balls and dumplings and all sorts of different things, right? So it was novel to them. I know it sounds bizarre to somebody from Europe. And yeah, I started selling my sandwiches to this kid. So I'd be getting sandwiches in my lunchbox. I'm selling him to him, and then I'm getting that, and I'm going to the canteen, and I'm buying whatever I want to eat. And I realized that was probably my first ever kind of business deal. And I was like 11, 12 years old. So I guess I always kind of had a bug. I never realized, and maybe it was not nurtured the right way. And perhaps now schools, and I think actually schools are better at that now. I think that schools do try and foster more entrepreneurship in young people. Just that, when I was in school 30 years ago, they didn't really. You were training kids to be, doctors, engineers, whatever it is. They were going to go into a profession, they were going to work. It was a lot rarer for somebody to become an entrepreneur in that sense. Whereas nowadays, it's all about that. You can see teenagers. I don't know if you have children of your own, but if you've got young kids, teenagers, that's what it's all about now. They're all creating businesses and business plans and products, and it's quite inspiring to see.
It does. I mean, still in the West, we don't teach that much entrepreneurship. I believe so. I don't know how things work in Hong Kong, East Asia, or Far East Asia. But yeah, today there is much more awareness to become an entrepreneur. I'm 53. I mean, startup at my age or 20, we didn't know what startup, the terms of startup was, except for starting a business, right? Now, a startup, it's a cult. It's an entire ecosystem built on startups. So it's true that today is much easier for many to start a business as it was before. But
Exactly.
I completely agree with you. I mean, 13 is a good age to start doing business.
Yeah, indeed. Maybe that's what I should go back to, full circle, do a sandwich company.
How did you change the life in terms of becoming an entrepreneur? I mean, as you said before, you must change somehow your lifestyle, but also the routine, how you manage your day routine. How did your life change?
Yeah, so it's something I've talked about this before, right? It's sort of, how do I do the things that I do? Because obviously, preferred is my main job, and that's my full-time job. And then I've got sort of 3 or 4 other part-time jobs. Is the truth. I'm involved in lots of different things. I'd say there's two main reasons that I've been able to do that. One is, for all of my businesses, I've had co-founders. I've always been one of those. I enjoy working with people. Some people want to be solopreneurs and they just want to do their own thing, and others work well, with others, and that's me. I like to work with people, all sorts of people, different ages, demographics. They don't always have to agree with me. We don't have to see exactly eye to eye on everything. What is more important to me is, can we overcome conflict and find compromise? Because that is the way the world works. You don't agree with everyone, but you try and find a compromise with people that you don't necessarily agree with, right? And that's what it's all about. And I've always been able to find people that I could work with, different types of people. So for all of the businesses I'm involved in, I've got at least 1 and sometimes 2 co-founders. That means there's 2 to 3 co-founders in total, including me. And I've always found that it's a system that works quite well for me personally. It doesn't work for everyone. So that's one thing I would say that has helped, because even if my attention is temporarily somewhere else, I know that there's at least 1 or 2 other people that are really focusing on this, that we're all aligned on the same game plan and strategy. That's one. And then 2 is time management. I've got a very disciplined way of managing my time. I don't do it as aggressively as some people, which is like 10, 15-minute blocks. I'm a 30-minute block person, but I break my whole day into 30-minute blocks. And those blocks can be obviously personal time in the morning, as well as maybe going to the gym at lunch. But then there's also reading time and research time in the mornings, obviously catching up with emails, multiple meetings per day. I'm probably having half a dozen meetings at least per day, plus also in internal meetings. I keep internal meetings very lean. I don't do any more than 1 internal meeting a day, because the last thing I want is people just to be stuck in 2, 3, 4, 5 hours of internal meetings, when actually you could probably make a consensus through a shared Google Doc or a Slack channel. You can actually get consensus asynchronously through doing things like that. You don't have to have all these people sat for an hour or 2 in a room. It's not very efficient. So I'd say that that's probably the other thing, is just very efficient time management of my own, but then also of the company, and making sure that we are just focused on the goal and on building and on the product, and not so much time. Obviously, it's important to still have that. I think people also need to have that connection, but I think once a day is enough. So that's typically what we do. We'll have a check-in with different members of the teams each day, once a day. And that's probably how we do it.
I mean, method, I believe, is everything. Scheduling your day is extraordinarily important. As I always say to all founders, I mean, motivation is good, but motivation won't be there any single day. There are days very bad, very tough, where you are not motivated at all, but you still need to find a way to go. The method and discipline will help you to go. That's indeed. But let me talk about motivation. How do you keep yourself motivated, even a bad day, outside having a methodic way to do to structure your day, but you still need energy outside
Correct.
all of it.
Yeah, I think everyone's. I mean, everybody is different, so I don't think there's one rule that fits everyone. What obviously works for me is just basic stuff, right? I try and get enough sleep at night. I'm not one of those founders who, wants to get 3 hours of sleep at night, just hustle, hustle, hustle. Wake up at 5 a.m., go to bed at 2. I'm not like that. I want to get a good solid night's sleep. 7, 8 hours at least if I can. I think that helps. I definitely go and do like movement per day. So I go to the gym pretty much every day at lunch. And that it's not a long amount of time, maybe 45 minutes or so, and then 15 minutes to get changed back in the office, right? So it's 15 minutes every day in the middle of the day, which means I don't get that afternoon slump that some people get, post lunch. So I think obviously movement, a high intensity exercise each day, getting enough sleep, and then for me personally, also mindfulness. I meditate every morning. I think it's cotton on now. A lot of people do this anyway, whether it's meditation or just 5 minutes of silence, but I think that really helps. What I'll do is I wake up. I've got a young son, so I don't look at my phone initially. I just want to spend time with my kid for at least the first half an hour of the day, if I can, the first hour. Then I'm obviously checking all of my messages. By that point, it's about 8 o'clock. I'm checking all of my messages and catching up. I drop my son off at school. I'm very lucky that his school is near where I work, so I can literally drop him off at school and walk to my office, which again gets the body going. And then, it's just focus on work with that gym break. Even on the gym break, though, I am available. If people need to contact me, they can reach me. If there's anything that's important that comes through on Slack, I will respond. So it's not like it's 45 minutes completely cut off from what I'm doing, which some people may not agree with because I'm not switching off. But it helps me anyway because I'm moving and getting the adrenaline going and the blood rate elevated. And then, come back to the desk and obviously power through as much as I can, get home to see my son again. So I'm normally actually home not that late. I'm home by like 5:15, 5:30. And then I spend that time with my son before he goes to bed again at 8. And then I'm normally working again for at least a couple hours in the evening. So what it is work-life integration, right? As you probably picked up on. It's not a case of I work and then I stop work. It's, personal life, work, personal life, work, personal life, work, personal life. That's kind of how the day looks. And I find doing it this way, I don't burn out. I get enough rest, I get enough exercise, I get enough family time, but I also get to put in quite a lot of hours in that day, right? It's not the Alibaba 996 routine, which is now unfortunately starting to catch on now in Silicon Valley, where people work from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Saturday non-stop. It's not quite that levels of work, but I am able to get in, quite a lot done, over the course of that structured day.
You need some kind of balance, although it's not that simple. But yes, I believe you need to balance your life. Let's move to burnout. There are so many fans that just give up because it's too much. And
Right.
I do believe if they find the right balance. So 9 to 9. I think my first startup, I was working 15 hours per day probably. Without any form of exaggeration, 50 per day, Monday to Sunday. I never stopped. There's no way. Just going to the gym because I need to go to the gym.
Yeah.
But outside this was no stop. After I realized after the sixth one, I said, you know what, EquityMatch is my sixth one. And I say, it doesn't make any difference if I work 15 or 9 or 8. It's about the quality of the work and the quality, my quality, me while I'm working. So how strong I am and how strong is my performance. Because if I work from the first 8 hours, 9 hours, and after I start declining, that time it probably is not worth it to be spent on working. You can do something different because the outcome is not that great. And maybe you need to go back again to what you've done there before because we're too tight. Again, was not delivered as should have been delivered. So I believe balance makes a good difference in not only in working, but also in living your life. You must live your life, right? You don't just work. You don't live for working, but maybe you work for living.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think your balance is important. Yeah.
It is. I believe so. You do a lot, but in working in your daily routine as an entrepreneur, what you like the most. I mean, what's the part that you like the most? Talking to people, doing accounting? I don't think so. What do you enjoy the most?
What do I enjoy or what's lacking? I mean, I'll tell you what I think is lacking. So I used to play a lot of rugby when I was a bit younger, before I became a father, and I love rugby. I'm in my 40s now, so rugby does hurt, but I do miss it. And the thing with rugby is, as much fun as it is, it takes a lot out of you because you have the game, but then there's the preparing for the game, there's the post-game festivity. So it kind of takes up pretty much most, if not all, of a Saturday. So that's one day in the week. It's basically gone, given away to that. And if you're really committed, then you're also training on a twice a week, normally on a Tuesday and a Thursday. And I did used to do it, particularly before I was an entrepreneur. And then I did also when I was probably running my own bootstrap companies. But yeah, since I raised external capital, I have found it harder and harder to do something like that. So maybe that's a failing on my part, that I'm not able to sort of give myself that space and time to take on that kind of a hobby, which will take up a whole Saturday and maybe a portion of a Tuesday and a Thursday evening. And that's something I should think about. But then, saying that, I am looking to get into like pickleball with my wife. Right, we're about to start playing pickleball on a weekly basis. So, but I think that if I've been really critical and honest, perhaps that's one thing which is perhaps missing, is having that other kind of hobby. And also the other thing that I've been talking about doing for a while is doing a lot more sailing. I grew up as a kid sailing, and Hong Kong is a great place to go sailing. My dad used to had a boat. Even though he was a police officer. So I really loved growing up on boats. So that's probably something I'd also like to do. But again, it's a lot of work. But the difference is I can take my family with me on that, right? I can have my wife and my kid on the boat, and I can be sailing with them. I guess you could say that you do the same with rugby, but it's a bit more boisterous, particularly after the game when you're on the beers. So I'd say that that's probably something that I would say is missing, and I'd like to bring in. What was the other part of that question, Max? Just remind me.
I mean, we've been talking about how how do you routine yourself, okay? At the same time, what you like the most during your routine. I mean, what you enjoy, the part that you actually enjoy the most, not only, as you said before, rugby, but not only
rugby, yeah,
but inside the entrepreneurship journey. So let's say you told me you spend a lot of time in talking to people, right? Is this the part you enjoy the most? The relationship?
Got it. Yeah, I think for me that I enjoy learning about other people's passions. Is probably more than about necessarily meeting lots of new people, because actually the truth is, even though I may not sound it, I do actually need to recharge, right? Some people get energized being around lots of new people. They're kind of extroverted, and that's where they draw their energy from. And you get other people that can also network, and they can meet people, and they can communicate, but then also they need silence. And maybe they need to spend a whole evening at home, or maybe a whole day doing nothing without leaving the house. I actually fall into that category more. Even though I do meet a lot of people and I speak to people every day, I also need to have that kind of peace and quiet to recharge. But what it is for me is I'm always interested in particular, to speak to entrepreneurs. I love speaking to people that are passionate about whatever it is that they're building. And I was very lucky when I ran that fintech lending company. That was what I was doing every day. It was talking to entrepreneurs that needed to get access to financing to support the growth of their businesses, or even the survival of their businesses. So I love that. And then even now with Preferred, most of our clients at the moment are SMEs and startups. So again, it's passionate to sort of work with them on what it is they're looking for in terms of talent, in terms of new business opportunities, any other kind of connections or introductions. That's what I also find very exciting. So that's probably some of it. But yeah, truth is, I also do build relationships over time. As I mentioned, I do have co-founders and I work well with them. So I think there's also a part of a lot of the people that are maybe started off as an acquaintance or business introduction, they do become real friends. And I think that's very valued. And I'm sure you've experienced this in your career as well. There's people that you get to know over decades, and you really trust each other, and you obviously really enjoy their company. They become your friends as well. So I think that's also a big part of it.
It does. I mean, you build a relationship for sure. In a good day, in a bad day, especially in a bad day.
Yes, exactly. I think also founders need to support each other as well. I think you see that more and more now, but I think founders do need to be there for each other, because as we both know, they're hard days. you struggle, you might lose a client account or have cash flow problems, or maybe you're dealing with staff that have their own, emotional or personal problems that they're sharing with you. So there's all sorts of things that can arise. And yeah, you do need to look after each other, because I think sometimes there's this perception, that it's all great and easy, and you're going to drive the Lamborghini home at the end of the day and party on your Sunseeker yacht. And it's not like that for everyone. And maybe it's like that sometimes it is. And maybe for tiny percentage of people, not even a percentage of people, right? A few people out of thousands of entrepreneurs will achieve that kind of success and wealth. The vast majority can do very well, but there'll be good and bad days and ups and downs. And I think, people need to look after and support each other through that.
Absolutely. Let me move to failure, right? I mean, as you said before, 98, 96, 95, as you want to take this number, the majority of startups fail. What's your relationship with failure? I mean, do you think about failure, or you just don't care at all? It happens, period.
Yeah, I mean, I had to deal with that myself. So one of the companies I set up, it was the third company I'd set up. We saw an opportunity in the market. This is about 10 years ago in Hong Kong. We saw an opportunity in the market to create a co-working space in a up and coming area of Hong Kong. We were going to do it at a very low margin, so it was like a no frills office. But we wanted to support entrepreneurs, right? So it was to foster entrepreneurs who want to keep costs low. So we created this co-working space. We got 100% occupancy. Everything was going well. And then about 3 months after we got 100% occupancy, down the road, WeWork opened. And I have a bit of a chip on my shoulder about WeWork. But basically, WeWork opened down the road, and they were offering less than what we were offering to have this Google office with water features and hanging gardens and beer on tap, free flow. And, we couldn't believe it. We're like, how on earth are these guys doing this? And obviously, with hindsight, we all found out that it wasn't a sustainable business model, right? WeWork was their customer acquisition cost was never sustainable. They were spending $3 to make $1. They were doing that through cheap private equity money. And what the policy was to blow everyone else out of the water and then acquire them and then basically raise prices later. And so we got decimated by that, and we had to liquidate all the assets of the business. So I would call that a failure. And why did we fail? One, well, maybe we didn't have enough economies of scale. Maybe we should have gone a little bit bigger and we could have reduced the cost somewhat that way. Two, we could have maybe had a bit more external capital. When they came in and they were offering these rates, we couldn't really compete. We didn't have a deep enough pool of capital to get us through that place. Or three, maybe it was just the wrong business at the wrong time. Maybe we just weren't able, we were not going to be able to compete unless we had some kind of other moat or niche, which we didn't have at that time. So yeah, we liquidated the assets of that business. But I wouldn't call it 100% of a failure, because we kind of turned that failure into a moderate success. So we liquidated all of the furniture and the assets in the business. And then because we had all these entrepreneurs that were in the office, myself and the other co-founders said, why don't we just make investments in a few of them? Let's just make bets in a few of these founders and see what will happen, sprinkle some capital between them and see what grows. And actually, in the end, the CTO and the CEO for Zettel, my fintech lending company, were actually two of the guys that had been in that office. So even though it was a failure, and we called it a failure, something good still came from it, which then itself became a success. I don't think any of the other investments made money, actually, but yeah, there was something that came from it. And actually, even now, that company is now a vehicle that we use, and we actually do have some shareholdings in various companies. And actually, I think I can disclose it. We have a shareholding in SpaceX. So when they do the listing later on this year, we should make a return from that. So that became a vehicle we used to invest. I wouldn't call it a VC. It's just a private investment vehicle, but that's kind of what it came from. So it was a failure. We had to put our hands up and say we failed in that, but then we were able to turn it into something. So yeah, I think that dealing with failure was something I've had to face head on. It was tough. I think everyone, if you've got confidence or an ego, whatever you want to call it, it hurts, but also then you realize just how many entrepreneurs do fail. It's actually quite common for entrepreneurs to fail, right? And even now, the founder of WeWork, Adam Newman, he raised $400 million for his other startup a couple of years ago. even though they'd shown what he did at WeWork. So I think even through failure, right, you learn valuable lessons, maybe become a little bit more conscious of any other stakeholders and things like that. So I've experienced failure. Yeah, I know what it feels like. And of course, also with other businesses, there's all sorts of tough days.
I mean, I believe 100% failure is not there for anybody as long as you learn, right? And
Yeah, exactly.
I don't even consider failure. I mean, I consider failure just a part of what is your entrepreneurial life, especially when you have your first endeavor, your first venture. I mean, you fail 100%. I mean, it doesn't mean you fail and going to shut down your company, but you daily fail because you are not there yet and you had so much to learn. So this pretty much can happen. But again, you turn failure in probably success. You invested. It was not that bad. Anyway, we need to cope with it. There is nothing you can do.
Yeah, it could have been worse for sure. It definitely could have been worse. Yeah.
You learn. I mean, what's your take to today tech ecosystem? I mean, there is so much talk. There are events everywhere. There is a massive structure built around startups. Do you think it's effective? It's a kind of bubble, delivers what actually it declares to deliver?
Interesting. So I think, look, everything is moving so rapidly now, right? Because with AI, we obviously all know what's going on with Anthropic and Claude and all the various plugins, right? And anybody you speak to is either using them already or looking to use them. So I think that we're in a very interesting situation where, we've got the impact of AI and what that's doing to jobs. And so what we're seeing is the impact is negative so far, right? So Jack Dorsey of Block 2 weeks ago came out and cut 40% of his workforce. He went from 10,000 to 6,000 employees in one tweet, I think it was. And that's existential. And a lot of other companies now, large enterprises, SaaS businesses, technology companies are looking at this and going, I can increase my return on investment, maximizing each individual employee's value by cutting and using AI agents and other tools. So what that's going to do is that's going to lead to a lot of people out of work. Now, a lot of these people are very talented, very capable, very smart. Are they all going to get employment elsewhere? Probably not. What I believe is going to happen, and I think we're already starting to see it, is there's going to be even more entrepreneurship, even more startups, but also a lot more solopreneurs. I think they're going to see a lot more people, just single people running their own companies. Could be an e-commerce business plugged into some kind of payment gateway. You've got AI agents helping you to manage anything with chatbots, and it just creates income. I think we're going to see a lot more of these types of businesses coming about. We're going to see a lot of very talented people working together and forming companies. So I don't think it's the death of startups. I think that enterprises, we're going to see a lot of headcount reductions. We're already seeing that through AI digital transformation, a lot of headcount reduction. So I think that trend is going to continue. That'll maximize shareholder value. So the stock prices will go up the more they cut headcount, which is always an awful thing to see. And I think there will be a lot more entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and startups that will be emerging because not everybody's going to be able to get a full-time role. So out of necessity, they are going to have to create multiple streams of income to ensure their lifestyles. And you can't just all be trading crypto all day or trading the stock market, right? You've got to do other things. And I think that's what's going to happen, right?
You can trade, but I've been a trader myself. It's not that simple.
Yeah, exactly. Me too, right? It's not simple.
Trading, it's very, very tough. Even though now you can use AI, it's still very tough. Predictions, very, very tough.
Exactly. Because also a lot of other people are using AI, right? And you're up against institutional investors who are even more sophisticated.
Of course. And also, when you trade, you're not the one who's going to drive the market. So it's a different story.
Market makers that do that. Exactly. Yeah. So I think what we're going to see is it's going to continue. That out of necessity, we're going to see a lot more companies being formed. And there's actually data to back this up. So in Hong Kong last year, so 2025 year end, there were more companies incorporated than ever in history over the course of 12 months. So the data is there that people are setting up companies, whether they're their own or co-founders or other businesses. So that's my personal opinion is going to happen. And of course, we're seeing how AI is destroying jobs. We haven't yet seen how AI is going to create new jobs and new wealth. everyone forecasts that it will. We can't always perceive how that's going to happen. Like with any new technology, when it comes in, people will announce it as the death knell of some other industries. But what actually tends to happen is it gets adopted by others. So
Yep.
I do think that we're going to start to see that happen. There will be new jobs and wealth that's created, but maybe not right now, maybe next year. I hope next year. I think it's coming. I just don't think it's now.
Yeah, we still need to see, but for sure we're seeing a bit cut. Well, you're right, we still need to see where those jobs would be created adopting AI.
Yes.
I mean,
Right.
you had already a pretty long entrepreneurial journey.
Guess, yeah.
If you have, I mean, I'm sure you will have more to come, but if you stop today, okay, looking back, what's the best lesson you got?
I would say perhaps earlier in my career, don't try and take on too much at the same time. I was definitely guilty of trying to do too much and trying to shoulder too much responsibility at times. And some people are just like that. And I would say that I would look back at myself a few years ago, maybe even just maybe the beginning of COVID, perhaps around that time, if I'm being honest. And I would say, look, there's a lot going on. It's very stressful. We know that there's lots of negative news every day, but try not to take all of that responsibility onto your shoulders alone. You've got your partner, you've got your friends, you've got family, you have your hobbies or exercise, whatever your support network is. Try and maintain that, and don't let all of that stress and pressure get to you. Because I also definitely felt it. I think during COVID, there was some very tough times, and obviously for everybody there were tough times. But I would say just try and just take a breath, relax a bit, go and have a run, and just try and process it, and don't sort of immediately react to that stress. Sometimes you just sort of come back to it later, and having given yourself that time to cool down, you approach it with a different pair of eyes.
Oh yeah,
and that's better for your health and also better for the problem.
100%. Take a break, even sleep over, and we see things.
Sometimes.
Yeah, they look in a different way. Let me close with a recommendation, right? Outside what you already said, to any founders watching today, what would be your recommendation to them?
Find out what kind of a personality type you are. Do you want to work on your own? Do you want to work with others? Try and understand that early. If you're somebody that just wants to do everything themselves and manage their own time, you're probably a solopreneur. If you're somebody that has, you want to work with others, or you have high ambition to work on tight deadlines and maybe raise external capital, then maybe you can work, with others. Understand that the risks are high. Try and make sure you've got a safety net, whether that is your own personal safety net, as in you've saved up a bit of money from prior jobs, or you inherited some money, whatever it is. Try and give yourself a safety net, because there could be some tough times ahead. And if things go rough, can you see yourself through those periods? Because the number one indicator of success is grit, resilience, determination. Because plenty of people set up companies and come in with grand ideas, but it's when things get tough, how do you react and how long can you endure? That's actually going to be one of the biggest indicators of whether that venture of yours is going to succeed. So just try and be prepared for that. And look after your body, look after your mind, manage stress, do exercise, eat well, sleep well, and obviously make sure you spend time with your loved ones as well. Because in the future, and I'm sure I'm going to feel this as well 20 years from now, of course, it's great to have all the success, but all statistics you see of people who are in their 70s and beyond talk about what are the regrets they had or what they want from life. And so I just wish I spent more time with my family. I just wish I just had enjoyed those moments more. And the difference is for them, they didn't have mobile phones that were invading their every waking moment. And that's something I think we all need to be careful of, right? Be present with the people that we love. Don't always think about that email that's on my phone, that WhatsApp message, that Slack message I haven't responded to. Just try and put it down and be present and enjoy the moment that you're with your people that you love, and then get back to it.
Mark, thank you so much for coming to LifeOfAFounder. It's been an absolute pleasure for me. Thank you.